We're going back to the book of Romans this morning. We're going to start off. Chris is going to read Romans 8, verse 18. It's on the front of your bulletin.
I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us.
The present sufferings are not worth comparing the glory that we are to receive. That's what this is about. That's what Paul is telling the church in Rome in this letter. There's a lot of good stuff in Romans. I was looking through just chapter 8 last night, and there are several other really good sermons in chapter 8, and I'm probably going to do a couple of them in the near future. It'll start next Sunday, I'm sure. But this is one of the verses that I really like. In Romans, it says the sufferings of this present time. It doesn't say some people suffer. It doesn't say you don't suffer. It says the sufferings of this present time. It says you have them. Everybody does. And I know that at some time or another, you've all thought gloom, despair, and agony on me. Deep, dark depression, excessive misery. If it weren't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. Gloom, despair, and agony on me. That's from Hee-Haw. A long time ago, yes. And I know you probably all felt like back in the day or even today singing that song. And when you watched it on TV, that's what they were talking about. The troubles that they're having. In other words, they're saying, woe is me. Which these days, we have those gloom and despair days that we just talked about. We all have those days. Some people even have lives of gloom and despair. They never get over it. A lot of musicians have made a lot of money on writing songs and performing songs about gloom and despair. You know, REM's song, Everybody Hurts, that's exactly what that song is about. Or Eric Clapton's Tears in Heaven is what that's about. You know, and there are lots of more songs about people's troubles, and you know, nobody knows the troubles I've... Wait, that would be a good song, wouldn't it? Nobody knows the trouble. It is one, folks. Last week I told you about Mark Wahlberg, who, when he was very young, spent time in jail for attempted murder and assault. He had some gloom and despair in his life, and I told you about how he overcame it. He suffered as a young man. But wait just a minute. Do any of you think you've had it bad? You think you've had sufferings? Let me tell you about a few people. And you know most of them. One you may not know about that you're really going to be surprised about. But Sylvester Stallone at one time lived with his dog in a doghouse. Abraham Lincoln grew up in poverty and had a completely dysfunctional family. He became president, didn't he? Dolly Parton and Loretta Lynn both grew up in abject poverty. I've been to Loretta Lynn's childhood home. Let me tell you, they were poor. Jim Carrey dropped out of school at the age of 15 and later lived in a van. I don't know if it was down by the river or not, but he lived in a van. You know, Franklin Delano Roosevelt had polio and in a wheelchair was still elected president. Vincent van Gogh, the artist, suffered from severe mental problems. Yet he painted some of the most famous paintings that have ever been painted. And you know, he didn't sell but one before he died at a young age. And you all know about Job in the Bible. He had it all, but he lost it all. Those folks had some gloom and despair, didn't they? Let me tell you about one more. His name is Nick Vujicic. V-U-J-I-C-I-C. Nick is a motivational speaker. He travels all over the world doing Christian talks wherever he's wanted. He's been doing that for many years. He's an Australian-American Christian evangelist. He's a preacher. Nick was born with tetraamelia syndrome. Nick has no arms and no legs. People like that make you think twice about some of your sufferings, don't they? some of the things these people have had to overcome. I know you suffer. I know. And many people have suffered much more than you. Years ago, I had the opportunity to hear a speaker. He was the very first pilot shot down in Vietnam. He was a Navy fighter pilot. And he served the second longest term of a prisoner in war during Vietnam. He served 8 years in Vietnam prisons. He watched most of his other prisoners die, the prisoners in the camps where he was, die from starvation or dragged out of their cells and beat to death. He was most of that time in what we call the Hanoi Hilton. His name was Everett Alvarez. He was shot down over Hanoi in 1967 and spent 8 years in a prison camp until the war was half over and we rescued him. Since then, Everett has written 2 books. And he's done a lot of other things. He got a degree in law. He's an attorney. Ronald Reagan appointed him to be deputy director of the Peace Corps. His message that night when I got to hear him speak was, you think you've had it bad? There's always someone that's had it worse. And that was the point he was trying to make. The guy was a fantastic speaker. You could tell he was very well educated, but you could also tell from some of the stories he told that he had suffering while he was in that prison and watched many other prisoners suffer greatly. Of course, recently we were visiting with my aunt and uncle in Dallas. My uncle's a retired Vice Admiral of the U.S. Navy, and I was talking about him. I couldn't remember his name, and David, my uncle, said, "Oh, you're talking about Everett." Yeah, of course he knew him. But the guy was fantastic, but he overcame all his sufferings. That man suffered. So when we say that no matter how bad your sufferings are, no matter how bad you think they are, there's always someone that's suffering a lot more than you. You ever heard the saying, be kind to everyone because you don't know they may be having a hard time? Well, that's true. Suffering is part of this world. It's part of our lives. Job said in chapter 14, verse 1, Job says that mortals are few of days and full of trouble. It's part of our lives. You cannot go through this life without some kind of suffering. Gloom, despair, whatever is in your life, there is going to be suffering. You can't control when or how it's going to come, but you can control how you react to it, how you respond. We all have sufferings, right? You all have. You may not be right now, but I know you all have had some form of suffering in your life. Where you had to do without, or you thought you had to do without. Where you lost a loved one. Where you didn't have what you needed to do whatever you wanted to do or needed to do to help. Saw someone that needed help and you couldn't help them. And you felt like you were suffering at that time in your life. We all have a story. Maybe not the impact of some of the people that I've mentioned, but we all have a story that we can share. Well, briefly, here's my story. My mom and dad had 6 kids. I was the 5th of 6. Every 2 years or so, we would have to move because the house that we lived in was ready to be torn down. My dad worked for the State Highway Department until he had a stroke and could never work again. My mom was a nurse back when nurses didn't make much money. We were poor. But I never went to bed hungry. I don't remember not having clean clothes to wear. I don't remember not, before we went to bed, sitting around reading the Bible and praying together. We were a strong family unit, so we overcame what many people would think was suffering. We had gardens and grew most of our own vegetables. We had that many. I remember drawing water to have water when I was young. But every night we read the Bible and prayed together, which made us a strong family unit, which helped us overcome all of those sufferings that many people would say that we were suffering from. We used to say everybody in our family had a seizure problem because the government seized the house, then they seized the car, then they seized the washing machine. But no, we were a strong family. And many of the sufferings that people are going through today, I feel, is because we've gotten away from the strong family unit. That television and electronics have taken away the strong family unit. We don't sit down together and eat meals together like my family did when we were little. We were there. You sat around, Daddy said the blessing, and then we ate together and we talked about stuff together. You know, that was a strong family unit. That's my mother is the strongest Southern Baptist person I've ever met in my life. You can bet we did that. And if we had problems that day that we thought we were suffering from, we brought them out, and Mom or Dad, one would give us a solution. Usually it was my mother. So we worked our way through our sufferings together. But the family unit has pretty much been destroyed today. Even the government has added to the demise of the family unit, encouraging young people to have children and not get married. I'm sorry, Tony. But it's not what I'm talking about. You know, I read just recently that a young woman with 3 children, not married, not working, could bring in through social services the equivalent of $70,000 a year. They're encouraging them not to even want to work or overcome the sufferings that they're keeping on themselves. That to me is a form of slavery, really, if you look at it. But Paul tells us in what Chris read to consider the sufferings that you're going through today. Think about them. Go ahead, think about today and the days past. Think about those sufferings. And then he goes on and he tells us, but they are nothing compared to the glory that you are going to receive in the future, if you are a Christian. But Christianity does not give us a free pass. Knowing Jesus does not get you a get out of suffering free card. It doesn't. In fact, being a Christian may create suffering in your life, because if you are a good Christian, Satan is over there on your left shoulder whispering in your ear all the time trying to get you to turn away from him. So it can be tough being a Christian, because he's there and his demons, and we know he's got thousands of them, we've talked about that, they're trying to turn you away from Jesus and from being a good Christian. So Christians may suffer a little more than other people. In some countries they really do suffer. Jesus tells us in John 16:33, in this life you will have trouble. But they are not worth the blessings and the glory that we are to receive if we believe. When Jesus comes back and takes us home, we're going to be in such glory that these problems that we have today will be laughable. They'll mean nothing. As a matter of fact, you probably won't remember them. You won't even think about them. You won't have time to. I can imagine thinking that when I was a child, I wore hand-me-down tennis shoes when I'm in the presence of Jesus. Why would I think about something like that? Your sufferings will be gone from you when you receive your glory in heaven and you're taken up to be with God forever. And you'll laugh at it. Be as if they never happened. This church now and our living with Jesus today is pretty incredible. But down the road it's going to be something that's even more incredible, something you can't imagine, something that you might even say was awesome, and that's that glory that Paul wrote about to the church in Rome. So at the moment, some of you may be going through some terrible suffering. Really, some of you may. I don't know. But legitimately, you may think you're going through some terrible suffering right now. But really, how does that compare to what you're going to receive in the end? If you think about that, the sufferings are nothing. God, a lot of people say, well, why does God let people suffer? That's a tough, tough question. It makes you stronger, right? When you work your way through something, you're a stronger person, and it should bring you closer to Him and to Jesus Christ. But let me ask you something. Are y'all really suffering? Are you really? You really got any problems? that amount to much? Does anybody in here live in a doghouse? Anybody in here live in a van? Anybody in here ever had polio? Anybody in here have no arms and no legs? Folks, I don't think we're suffering. Nobody in here was born into severe poverty, were they? Tony was. You think you were. So I guess maybe we shouldn't be thinking about our sufferings. We've all got a pretty good education, right? Got a nice home to live in. Got a nice vehicle to drive. Got a job if you want one. Got nice clothes to wear. Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I don't have all those things. But if you don't, you're close, aren't you? There are many people that don't. You're not suffering like the people of South Sudan. South Sudan is the poorest country in the world. Violence. It's a landlocked country, so they can't have shipping. Got about 15 million people. Created in 2011, and they are the textbook example of a country that's suffering. There's extreme political and social divisions. There's inequality, there's corruption, there's war in the country and people trying to capture them. The majority of the population is employed in agriculture, but with their severe weather, most of the time they can't plant their crops, and if they get to plant their crops, they're destroyed and they don't get to harvest them. This year, 9 million people, or over 60% of their population, will need complete humanitarian assistance. South Sudan is the poorest country in the world. Now they are suffering. Think about that. Think about them and you will think, well, I got it pretty good, don't I? No suffering here, is there? Not really. But as I told you when I began, we do suffer. And as Christians, we may have to suffer a little more than non-Christians because the devil's always out to get us. But even for our small amount of suffering, if we continue to believe, we will receive that glory that Chris read about when we started. We got something to look forward to, that future glory. And when you get it, this suffering that you're going through today on earth will mean nothing. Go back and consider all those sufferings that you think you've had. Don't you think they've made you a little stronger? Made you work a little harder? Helped you to get where you are today? Made you appreciate the things that you do have? Well, they should have. But they should, most of all, give you a longing and anticipation and a wanting to have that glory that is yours in the end because you are a Christian. Anyway, Jesus has already suffered for all of your sufferings. Amen.
Amen.